What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Turn on the Jets podcast. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. TOJ Pod, TOJ Talks, all 32. I'm not going to do the whole resume every time. Try to get it in as quickly as possible. Tuesday afternoon here. Time of year we have to qualify when you record, just in case anything happens. The Jets have cut Devontae Adams, as expected, and Alan Lazard somehow
Big shocked.
was allowed to seek a trade, which in the wise words of Jason Fitzgerald, we have to have a line here at some point, and one you can cut must to trade. Zack Rosenblatt of The Athletic. Zach, how we doing? It was good to spend some time with you in Indy.
Yeah, good man. It always takes me a few days to recover from Indy, but I'm finally on the track. I'm in the off-season mode, as people in the Discord know, of getting back to the gym because I get really bad about it. During the season, the off season is when I go like every day, and then every year I'm like I'm going to do it during the season, and then the season comes and I don't. But we're in the off season Super Bowl, or the Jets fans Super Bowl. It's always just funny seeing the energy shift and the interest in our content shift and all that stuff once the off season hits. But this is the good stuff. This is where hope springs eternal, and everybody will talk themselves into everything the Jets do. Although, I mean, I think there are some fans that are going into it already skeptical. It seems like I don't know if it's a large portion, but there's a portion of the fan base that is like negative out of the gate. But yeah, this is a fun time of the year where you try to figure out where everybody's going, and then once they do, how they fit in or why they did so and so. So it's gonna be interesting to see what Glenn and Bougie do next week.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page. It does seem like because of kind of how much everyone got excited about last couple of years, that people are almost in a pessimistic mindset going in, which again may work to the Jets' favor if like you actually do some things that are smart business wise, not necessarily just for the jersey sales and other things like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, coming out of Indy, it's rumor central, and there's a million different things going on. You had an article out, I believe, yesterday morning, talking about kind of things you were hearing around the Jets, what to expect, what maybe not to expect. I guess biggest takeaways. What were I guess some of the biggest takeaways from that? Were you kind of surprised by anything, or was kind of everything a little bit pretty much what you were expecting going into the week?
I wouldn't say surprised. I mean, I think, it's all noise right now. I think it's always important to couch it. Like everybody's hearing things, everybody's talking. I think the Jets have done a pretty good job of keeping things mostly close to the vest. But, I mean, the biggest question everybody has is their plan at quarterback. And, I mean, I'm not the first person to say Justin Fields is somebody that's on their list. I think Connor Hughes and I were the only ones to mention Carson Wentz uh, as like a potential competition for Tyrod in a rookie type situation. But ultimately, the idea being they're not going to like go all out to sign somebody like Sam Darnold. I mean, there's not really any go all out guys even available, which is the crazy part about this offseason. Like the smart approach is to just kind of take it easy. I know everybody wants the shiny thing, but not even saying Sam Darnold, but it's like as weak as an offseason in terms of quarterbacks available as I can remember. So I think if they go the prudent approach, both at quarterback and in free agency, I think that's the right move. You don't want to go overspending. This is not a team that's a player or two away. They have a good core, but they're still more than a few players away from contending, let alone, making the playoffs. So I think not going crazy this offseason, trying to invest in guys. And I always emphasize they've always gone in and out of like doing this at the wrong times. It's what the Eagles always do. You find guys that, if you're not a Super Bowl contender, you try to find guys that are young with room to improve that you can get at a reasonable rate. So like a John Simpson last year, a DJ Reed a couple years ago. There's a couple guys in free agency that make sense with that. I think that's kind of like where they should be shopping, and I get the sense they will. But until it happens, like usually there's always somebody that nobody's even talking about, or somebody that you don't expect is going to get cut or whatever it is. Like I don't think everybody was talking about the idea of Tyron Smith at this time last year, but I don't think anybody actually believed they would get him. I don't think the Jets believed they would get him. I think there were people in the Jets building that didn't necessarily want him and others that did. But anyway, the point being, like, when free agency started last year, I don't think people expected the Jets to get Tyron Smith. So, you got to, as Mike Vrabel once says a lot, you got to keep your knees bent and your head on a swivel at all times. So,
yeah, no, there's definitely Fields is the one thing you keep hearing. It's been for a while now. I would say going on 3 months here of Justin Fields being somebody that's being
Yep.
mentioned around, kind of around the building. I want to emphasize this very clearly. I do not think Justin Fields is going to turn into Patrick Mahomes. Like, he's not. But what I will say is that if you leave free agency with Fields and Tyrod as your quarterbacks, at least you can go into the draft not having to press like the panic button of, oh my God, we have to take Jackson Dart at 7 because we're so fucked at quarterback. And like we have no other choice, or we have to push the Carson Wentz button because we have no other choice here. And like we don't know if Tyrod's gonna play, and Jordan Travis is like tweeting through agents and all these different, like, we don't, it would put you at ease. And that's why, like, to me, it's a 2-year, it's going to look like a balloon number of like $30 million. It's really a 1-year, $15 million deal. It's basically what Sam got last year, where it's like low base salary. If you play a bunch of games, you'll make all the money. And Sam made all the money he could have made last year. And then you figure it out next year. And whether it's a rookie or whatever, you get the same sense where, I don't know, I just think he's a Jet if he's not a Steeler. It's kind of the feeling I get. But the problem is that if Russ is gone, the Steelers might, I don't know why from Fields' perspective you would stay with Pittsburgh knowing they benched you and then could have gone back to you a million times and didn't. Do you feel like that's how we kind of end up here? It's like day one of free agency, one of the first guys is going to probably be Fields, right? Like, it kind of feels like that.
Maybe. So I would say a couple things. Number one, it does seem like the Steelers are going to try and sign him before, and if I don't know if they like make it clear to him he's the starter, maybe that changes things for him. But as you said, they did bench him. I do think it does ultimately come down to like the Steelers and Jets are the top contenders, but I'm not prepared to say nobody else
Yeah.
could steal him. Like the Colts are a name you keep hearing. I've seen people say the Titans, even like teams like that who, if they don't believe in this rookie class, like Fields is like especially in the modern era of these redemption quarterbacks, like he's like the lottery ticket that's out there because he's a young guy. He's got a clearly defined skill, which is mobility, which you can't teach. And if you're somebody who believes you can coach up a quarterback into being better than he was, like you know, none of these openings are probably going to be like a Kevin O'Connell situation because he's as good as it gets with coaching quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But can it be like a Baker Mayfield going to play with Dave Canales or whatever, like whatever of these redemption stories you want to point to? I think Fields and even Daniel Jones to a degree are two that like you could see a team talking themselves into. Like he just hasn't been in a good environment, which Jones definitely wasn't. Fields in Chicago was not. He was playing okay with the Steelers. Was like mistake-free football. They weren't letting him make mistakes. He's the kind of guy that also can excite a fan base too because of his immobility. Like let's say he's the Jets quarterback. He's going to have weeks where fans absolutely love him. He's going to run for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns and they're going to win. And he's going to have weeks where he's 11 of 30 and throws 2 picks. Like it's going to be a wild week to week situation with him, but that's what the Jets should be doing this offseason. And it's why I think he makes the most sense. Whatever the number is, I can't imagine it would get so expensive that it's like, I can't believe they did that. I don't think he's that valued, but like you said, it's like a $15 million thing with incentives or whatever. You take a swing at him, you take a swing in the draft. You don't need to do in the first, whether it's a Jalen Milroe in the second round, like guys who have like a ceiling. And you're like, all right, we took a swing. If it didn't work out, we didn't invest all of our assets in him. And so that's what the Jets should be doing until they find the quarterback ultimately. And the tough part is being in that purgatory where if you win just enough games, you're kind of out of position to get like the top guys. The Jets don't have a third this year because of they have a second, third that's later, but they lost the Devontae one next year. They lose the Hassan Reddick one. So they're not like flush with draft capital because of some moves. So you want to invest in like young guys that you could hope you hit on, like the Eagles accidentally did with Jalen Hurts, or the Broncos. Whatever you think about Bo Nix, like he was good enough that like they were able to overcome their lack of salary cap. Like that's kind of how the Jets need to operate right now, since you don't have a surefire thing at quarterback.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of something the Jets have not been good at. And again, they haven't drafted well the last decade, but they've not done a good job of obviously drafting, developing, and then keeping.
Yeah.
They did it with Michael Carter last year. It was honestly shocking at the time they actually like decided to make a smart move there, and would he spend money on a
And
guy?
Quinnen.
Yeah, and Quinnen. Those are the only two, and Ashton Davis, bringing him back. But other than that, guys would be here and be here for their contract, either get traded or walk. you had on your show on Flight Plan. Obviously, again, make sure you guys subscribe, rate, review, do the whole thing. But you talked about Garrett and Sauce's is extremely easy to figure out. It's like if they beat the Texans to the punch, it's 4 for 100 for Sauce, and like anyone could draw it up. And if they don't, it'll probably be 4 for 105, and that's the way it's going to work if they want to get Sauce done. Garrett's a little tricky. Ayuk's probably the guy I would base it off of, just based on production and age and the whole 9 yards there. That's kind of what it makes sense. And if you look at Ayuk's number, he's extremely tradable now. So it's not like it screws you if for some reason Garrett gets hurt or doesn't drive with the team or whatever. Do you feel like, I think Jermaine, you wait, and Brees, it seems like I would wait on, unless you're going to lock in Brees's franchise tags, I don't see why you move yet. Sauce and Garrett do you feel like there's a chance one or both get done? The fan base, I think getting Garrett done in some way would show a signal to both the team and also the fan base, like, yay, we have something we can get excited about. Like, we might not be Super Bowl contenders this year, but like we actually locked up a good player we drafted and developed.
Yeah, I would say there's like a rush to do it. Like I don't think it's going to happen like before free agency. Um, and nobody really knows if the Jets are gonna like go out of their way to extend these. Like after 3 years used to be like unheard of. It happens more now. A few receivers over the last couple of years have done it.
Devontae Smith's one that comes to mind of like,
Devontae
yeah,
Smith
ahead
is
of it.
one.
He's cheap comparatively to these other guys.
Yeah, yeah. I believe a few of the receivers from that like AJ Brown draft, I believe, signed going into their fourth year. Um, the point, like, on one hand, they don't have to sign either of them. Like, they have the fifth-year option. They're both pretty reasonable for guys that are stars. And then you have the franchise tag option, all that stuff. But to your point, like, the Jets generally don't get ahead of it. Like, again, like, Howie Roseman's always the easiest one to reference. He's really smart about getting ahead of it with guys on contracts. And so you get them at what looks like top of the market rate, but you know how quickly the market changes. So, like, by the end of that contract, it looks like you have a guy on a bargain deal if he's a stud. So, I would recommend doing it. Like I Garrett is one that I feel like maybe requires it more than Sauce. But like in terms of like him, like feeling like it would show a lot of loyalty, and that's why I've said he would be up for negotiating. He would be up for signing. I don't know if I'm not. I don't think he would request a trade if they didn't sign him. Like I don't think we'd get a holdout or anything like that because it's a new regime and all that stuff. Um, and I think he wants to show what he can do, especially if somebody like Justin Fields is in there who he's close with. Um, and Sauce, like, it's just so much easier. Like as you said, Connor Hughes has said it. The contract's pretty reasonable if you just sign him right now. They don't have a lot of money on the books in the future outside of a bunch of dead cap hits. So I would like get the Sauce one done just because you can. He's a whatever. All the I mean you know it. All the BS was overdone about him like falling off like just because he didn't have an All Pro season in year 3. He had All Pro. He like created such an expectation that it looked like he had a worse year. When if he doesn't make an All Pro his first 2 years, you look at his numbers last year where he's forcing incompletions at a rate as high as anybody. He's getting targeted as infrequently as anybody. Anyway, you know the gist. He's still a top 5 to 10 corner in the NFL on a good day, and on
Yeah.
a great day, he's the best corner in the NFL. So, pay him $20 million a year or whatever it is for corners. I think it's something around like 20 to
Yeah,
24 or
Surtain
something
was
like that.
4 for 96, and he won
Yeah,
defense.
he'd probably be in around Certain, I would think. So
Yeah.
just give him that and call it a day. Like, and
Yeah.
you're fine with. And then if you feel, if he has another year where you're so about him, like he'll have trade value down the line. Like hypothetically, like if you're worried about that. So I think you get Sauce done, and then the Jets just need to decide if they value Garrett Wilson as a top 5 level salary receiver, even though that's changing constantly. And will this offseason just with it, Jamar and T Higgins and all these receivers getting new money. But anyway, long answer to say, I don't know for sure that they'll happen this offseason. I feel like at least one will, and maybe both. I don't know.
Yeah. No, look, I think we've talked about this a bunch. You've talked about it a bunch, and I know Connor and Joe have. The Jets waited on Quinn Williams. They didn't have to, and it's fine. But like Quinnen would have been cheaper than he was. He would have been a couple $1,000,000 a year cheaper. The Bengals waited on Jamar Chase, who would have cost them at most 32 or 33 last year. He's going to cost them $40 million a year now. That's a legit good guard starter that you're done. You can't do anything about that. because you waited. Jamar Chase obviously, had the year he had. I'm not saying Garrett's going to go for 2,000 yards next year, but if Garrett has a legit 1,400-yard receiving season
Yeah.
next year and 8 touchdowns and looks like every bit the guy we've seen a lot in flashes, well, $30 million a year looks like would have been a bargain. And I just feel like they kind of got to get ahead of some of these. And again, it's not just it's on ownership and everyone around to buy in, but I just feel like you just do something. If you're going to change all these different things, be ahead of the curve, not behind it. Jamie and Sherwood and Quincy Williams are two ones that we've referenced a bunch. I know I've talked about it. Connor, I think, talked about it as well. Bringing back Jamie and Sherwood. My question is going to be to you: you bring back Jamie in the next week, 3 years, $30 million, right? It's really a 2-year deal, classic NFL, but whatever, $30 million. That's all people are going to see. And Quincy Williams is sitting there like, hey, I kind of wanted to get a new deal last year. Love Jamie and I like being here with my brother, but what the fuck, man? What about me? This is going to be my last big contract. How would you approach it if you're, I almost said Joe Douglas, if you're Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn, are you trying to massage the ego of Quincy Williams and be like, we'll get you eventually? Or are you trying to tack on a year with a bigger money? What would you do? Zack Rosenblatt's in Darren Muji's chair. What are you doing if you're the Sherwood Quincy of it all? Because you'd like to have both guys together, but you also need to be smart about not upsetting one while upsetting the other.
Yeah, it's a tough, balance to bring because it there's also the precedent it sets where if you sign Sherwood and then Quincy's upset and then you give him more money, are you gonna have to start doing that with everybody kind of thing
Yeah.
is what it becomes. So I will say I think Sherwood is, I've heard from multiple teams and sources around the league, he's gonna have a pretty big market. And if the Jets let him hit free agency, I'm not 100% confident he comes back. I think he wants to. I think there's a mutual want to, but if a team really, and I've heard teams really really want him.
They'd
I
be
mean,
Atlanta and San Francisco potentially, who
yeah,
it
not.
up.
I mean, even outside of the obvious Atlanta, San Francisco ties, there's teams that have no ties to him that want him. So, and it kind of goes into what I was saying earlier. He's the kind of mold of free agent that I want the Jets to go after, which is 25-year-old guy ascending, had his best year, first year as a full-time starter, showed a lot, not perfect, but showed a lot. So, if the Jets sign him to a deal worth 8, 9, 10 million a year, I get the sense that Quincy will want to get paid too. He might already anyway. They got him at a pretty underrated deal. If you look back at it now, $6 million a year for an all-pro corner. He made an all-pro the year he signed it, I believe.
Yeah.
Going into the last year of his deal, he's 28, so he's not young anymore. I don't know. I lean towards trying to keep the talent in-house, and he's a playmaker, and the Jets need playmakers on defense, especially because they have a lot of holes right now. So even if you just tack on another year and give him a chunk of change to spread out the cap hit and clear some cap space or whatever it is, yeah, go ahead and do that. Make, whether add another year so his per year salary jumps up to 8 or 9 million or something like that.
Yeah.
And show him some love. But I don't know. I don't have a good read on what they think about Quincy, what they want out of their linebackers. I do think he didn't have as good of a year as the year before last year. I think it was kind of flew under the radar a little bit because they were a mess. I didn't think he had an amazing year. He still is not as much as early in his career, but he's still a little boomer bust in terms of it's either an amazing play or a boneheaded one. But he's very, very talented, very athletic. I think if you ask around the league, he probably ranks among the top 10 linebackers in the league. So you don't really want to get into a habit of letting those guys go. So I'd make him happy, but also if he's not saying he will do this, but if he starts throwing a fit because somebody else got money, then do you want that in the locker room? I don't think he'll do that necessarily. And if it's all cordial and it's clear both sides are happy with each other, then you bring him back.
Yeah. No, I'm on the same page as you. I think Quincy had some back stuff last year, but also I've talked about this for 4 years. CJ Mosley not being on the field kind of fucked everybody. He puts everybody in the right spot
Yep.
every play. He was the only guy under Salah, and Salah's talked about this. He was able to change the plays and be able to do whatever he wanted to do, and he could run the defense. He was running the defense on the field, and I think he made Jeff Ulbrich look a little bit better. I think he made Salah look better at times where, hey, if we're not in the right call or we need to, Jamie had to be here or Quincy had to be here, and these safeties that are rotating safeties all the time, having that real quarterback of the defense. I know Jamie took that on, but it was his first year starting, so you have to like take that in bits and pieces. I want to just touch on receiver and safety real quick. What's your read on Mosley? Because in my opinion, if he can play football next year, there's an argument to be made to go to CJ and say, hey, like, you're going to take a reserved role. It's Jamie and Quincy's show. We'd like to keep you as a locker room guy, help guide these guys, and like kind of slowly drift you off if he's cleared to play. If he's not, I think he either retires or if there's like some type of thing where it's like, this isn't going to work. Hey, I'm not going to take another pay cut. You probably post June want him, right? Is that kind of your read too? Because I don't think you want to lose CJ Mosley, the person and the leader, but you're not going to pay him $7 million this year. You just, or whatever it is. Like, I don't, right? You're not, I don't think again, he had some neck stuff, the foot. There was a lot last year. His body kind of collapsed on him, unfortunately.
Yeah, he has a $12.7 million cap hit.
Yeah,
one of the underrated mistakes of last year was, throwing out his contract and guaranteeing it for 2 years essentially instead of, cutting him for the cap savings or coming up with some other restructure. They were rewarding him for all he's done for this team, obviously, and you couldn't have predicted he'd only play 4 games. But I mean, if he's healthy enough to play, I'd try to bring him back, whether it's getting him to agree to a pay cut or whatever it is. Since they don't have any cap space, if they cut him now, they actually lose like $3 million. Like, there's not really any point of cutting him right now, so you can let him take his time. I don't think you factor in him as part of your plans if you get to June 1st or near or after the draft or whatever, and you didn't add linebackers and you want that locker room presence, then sure, I think they can bring him back. But also, it does seem like this coaching staff is really trying to turn over a lot from the previous regime, and that's not to say Mosley is like a bad thing from the previous regime, but I think they really are not gutting it, but they're really like moving on from pretty much everybody that was around last year. Like there's only like 1 or 2 coaches on the staff that were retained. Sean Jefferson and like an assistant. There was an assistant coach that was also retained, and they've just really turned it over. And you can't blame them. And Mosley, if he retires, I think his Jets career wound up being better than people thought it would be at the beginning. Even if you look at the totality, he missed a lot of games and stuff, and is probably overpaid ultimately. But yeah, it's probably the end of the road for him, is my guess. But I can't say that with certainty.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's just one of those things. It's like, hey, you at least have the conversation. Like, dude, are you playing football next year? And are you willing to like reduce your, Tyron Armstead just did this in Miami. It's like, hey, we're gonna basically reduce your cap hit to nothing, and if you end up playing, we'll end up paying you. But last 2 things here, actually, we'll combine receiver and tight end. My read, and I know you and Connor both reported this. My read is one of Juwan Johnson or Conklin will be here potentially as the tight end, and they'll draft somebody. That's my read on it, at least of like, that's what, in a kind of ideal situation for them. And then maybe it's Rucker, do they draft 2 or whatever. Receiver is like Tim Patrick and Josh Palmer and Darius Slayton, and I'm missing one other name. That's Christian Kirk and like those type of names where productive players, like, varying. They're not old and there's good moments there, but they're not obviously great players. Is that kind of the read you get from the skill group? Because they got to add like at least 2 receivers here, plus probably draft 1. Got to add at least 1 or 2 tight ends somehow. I think there's mutual, like Juwan Johnson's an exciting pass catcher for sure. He's the number 1 tight end in the market. So like he's gonna have Denver, New Orleans, Tennessee. There's a lot of different options there. I think wherever Juwan Johnson doesn't end up, Conklin ends up. Is my guess. What do you feel like on that? Just the skill group on offense outside of running back.
Yeah, I don't have a great read on the tight end. I know Conklin would be open to coming back. I don't know what the Jets feel about him, like the new regime. Yeah, I mean, it's again, like you said, Juwan. Like a lot of times, the worst teams will overpay a guy at the top of a free agency class, ignoring that he's like probably not like a guy worth that kind of money. So I'd be worried about that with Juwan.
Yep.
I think he's an interesting player, and again, the best tight end. And it's a weak free agency class at tight end. I wouldn't go and pay him $10 million a year if you can get him for 6 to 8 a year for 2 years or something like that, maybe. But yeah, the receiver market, I actually think Terry Slayton might wind up getting more money than people realize, just because he's like just been a solid NFL receiver, and I think he's gonna have a market. Yeah, he endured a lot in New York, and he was like the leading receiver every year still. other than this last year, I believe. He'd be a great compliment to Garrett Wilson. He might be a little pricey, but yeah, that's why somebody in the Josh Palmer, Christian Kirk is interesting if he gets cut. I assume he will be, uh, and if he's healthy, because he's really
Always sick.
fast, dynamic player when he's healthy. Um, I mean, Tim Patrick's more of a depth piece, and Josh Palmer is interesting and one of those like 25-year-old guys, like I talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you sign receiver or two, you draft a receiver and tight end or two, and you kind of make it work around Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, because you have those guys and Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, and so loading up on skill position guys with the ceiling is the way to go, and I think that's what they'll do. They'll shop in the middle of the market. You won't see them, breaking the bank for anybody, I don't think.
Yeah. The one thing with John Johnson's a little tough, and every Denver reporter you read thinks he's going to go, because John Payton obviously
Yeah.
developed him and stuff. John Johnson's numbers are like the same as Tyler Conklin's, if not worse, and he's 2 years younger, and maybe he's faster for sure, but he's going to cost you a lot more. So it's like a cost. Rick Spielman did draft Tyler Conklin as a little tidbit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
There you
go. The Jets shadow GM Rick Spielman. Last thing here is safety, and the reason I bring up safety is twofold. The Jets have not really addressed safety since the Jamal Adams and Marcus May days. I think they have guys, and you could talk yourself into, hey, can we bring back Mills or Davis and Tony Adams as depth pieces? But I don't think you want those guys starting games ideally for you, right? I mean, again, they're not in a win now window, but at the same time, like, I don't think those guys are viewed. I think they're viewed as more depth pieces, like special teams guys that can fill in a pinch. You mentioned Isaiah Oliver, who's kind of that nickel,
Yeah.
nickel and safety blend, can play all five spots, which is his value. Safety is weird because it's a good free agent class actually at safety, and there's some really nice pieces in the draft potentially. Aaron Glenn and Detroit did invest quite heavily in safety, and it helped them out, right? Kirby Joseph and
Yep.
Brian Branch are all pros. Guys are both, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kirby was a third rounder, Branch was a second rounder.
Yep.
Do you feel like this will be a position, just getting a read on kind of, and the Saints, we know, forever invested in Tyrann and all these different safeties. I feel like safety is going to be more of a priority play for the Jets than it's been in years past. I don't think they're going to just ignore it and run out like two guys for $1 million. Like, I don't get that feeling. Is there anybody that caught your eye looking at the free agency list, or did you get the same impression just kind of looking through what they need versus this new regime?
Yeah, I mean, I think the safeties were a big reason why the defense was as good as it was this last year. So I know maybe running a slightly different defense with Steve Wilkes calling plays, but um, you want safeties that can kind of be moved all over the formation, like chess pieces, like a Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph to a degree. So like the two in free agency that jump out to me are, I don't want to say his name wrong, but Talanoa Hufanga, is that how you say
Yeah.
it? Yeah. He's very intriguing. I know Jets fans want him. I think Jeremy Chin is somebody that makes a lot of sense in terms of like that skill set. Marcus Williams is a guy that played for Aaron Glenn in New Orleans. The Ravens are probably going to cut him. Probably a little past his prime and more along the lines of guys they've been signing, but you need two safeties, if not three. I think they bring back Tony Adams and probably Isaiah Oliver, but Oliver, like you said, is probably more of a corner. And Adams, ideally, is your third safety. I think he is better than maybe Woody Johnson thinks. But um, uh, yeah, that's where I'm at. I actually have a mock draft coming out tomorrow. I have them picking a safety in the second round. Probably won't actually last that long, but he did in the PFF mock draft I did, so I went with it. But
Nick Emanwari?
yes,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the guy.
He's an animal.
But I do think they'll draft a safety, and I think they'll sign one. I think they need to invest in the secondary, and they need a second corner also. You don't necessarily need to break the bank for that because you have Sauce, you have MC2, you have Isaiah Oliver, whatever you think about Quantez. And so whether you bring back Eccles, you draft somebody, shop in the middle of the market, whatever it is. You don't need to that's why I haven't been saying Carlton Davis, because I think he's going to cost a little more than the Jets probably are going to want to pay at corner, although he makes sense because of the Glenn ties. I think the priority should be more up front than at corner. But yeah, you can find some pretty good players. Like you said, the safety market, those guys generally don't get paid a lot. Like their contract figures always come in lower than you expect. So if you can get like Jeremy Chin at a pretty reasonable contract, like I think you feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, no, it's just a weird one because like safety is one of those positions where, because the Jets haven't really invested in it quite as much as they had in years past, Um, like it looks a little bit different. You mentioned one name there. There's Trayvon Mooring also from the Raiders is a guy
Yeah.
who's a really nice player, younger player. Those are like you mentioned. I just think getting guys on 2-year deals similar to what you got with John Simpson last year. That if
Yeah.
it hits, awesome. The guy's a great value play in 26, and if they suck, you probably cut them anyways, and like you keep it moving. One other name I'd be curious they brought back in the D line is I would be interested to see if they brought Sheldon Rankins back on a cheap deal. Was really loved here and like
Great media guy.
did a great media guy. I think media good guy of the year one year.
He was. He was.
That plus also the fact that like if
Fine
you
rotational guy. Yeah.
find a rotational guy at this point, could him and Leonard Taylor be part of your second your second rotation.
And Levi on Wuzurike also makes sense.
Oh yeah,
Obviously, I'm sure you've talked about him.
Puna Ford.
He's another one. Yeah, Puna Ford. I was talking to our Chargers athletic writer. He was like raving about how good Puna Ford was for the Chargers last year, and he knows football, so I trust him. Yeah, but Levi and Wuzurike. I mean, obviously there's Lions ties. He's another one. 25, untapped potential. He had a lot of injuries early in his career. Like, I'd be interested in signing like a Levi, a Rankins, and drafting somebody. Like I don't think Mason Graham's actually going to fall to 7, but he's the most popular target, I think, and I think they are interested. But I mean, if he does, then you just keep loading up on the big dudes up front, like whatever. Like if you sign Levi and Rankins, like that shouldn't stop you from even signing Mason Graham. Just like rotate those guys through, keep winning fresh, like, and then it makes life easier on the outside guys too. So I'd be. That's the way to go. I mean, again, I keep referencing the Eagles because they've done an elite job of building that roster.
Yeah.
They got Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter in back-to-back drafts, on top of Nolan Smith and signing Bryce Huff, and they have Josh Sweat already.
Trading for Myles Garrett at some point here.
Milton Williams, they drafted him. He's about to get a payday. Like, so they load up in the front, and the Jets have not done a good job of that over the years. So,
Zach, last question for you. We'll have fun here. Two-part question. We'll keep it quick. Favorite meal of Indy? I know you. As much as Connor gets credit for being a food guy, I would say, actually have way better food taste.
I'm a foodie.
A, and then B, which Lion, or I guess, or former Niner or Saint, right, with Wilkes and whatever, which Lion is getting the whatever fridge she starts at noon or 12 o'clock at night, whatever it is.
Like the first guy.
Who's the first within 14 minutes? I'm going to go Dan Skipper is going to compete for the right tackle job. Obscene tweet that we're going to get from Schefter, Rappaport, and then convince ourselves that the guy who is a eligible lineman is going to start at right tackle. Favorite meal in Indy, and then secondly, who's the first guy off the board for the Jets in a week's time?
So went to this new spot I'd never been to. I found it online. I went with Daniel Popper, who covers the Chargers, Andy Vasquez, and Ryan Novozinski, who covers the Giants for NJ.com. This spot called The Livery, Livery. It's like this Mexican spot, and it was like really, really good. They had these empanadas that were amazing. Or I don't know if maybe it was more Latin than Mexican, but man, like every single thing we had slapped. We had like these chicken tinga tacos. We had some like skirt steak. It was like a shareable place type situation, and we decided we're going to start going there every year. Great margaritas. Everybody in the Discord knows I love some tequila, so
Yeah.
I'll go with that. And then in terms of like the first one, oh man, that's a good one.
I thought Amik Robertson was a free agent, and he's not. That was going to be my guess, just because he was like classic Glenn guy, like undersized.
Yeah. I mean, so a couple that are jumping in my head right away are Ifeatu Melifonwu, because I think he and Aaron Glenn had a really good relationship. Derek Barnes, the linebacker, and on the Broncos, Matt Peart, the offensive tackle. I heard they're interested in him. He's not. I covered the Giants when they drafted him, and he was not very impressive to me. But it seems like he became a little bit better than he was at the beginning of his career.
In Denver, where he got way better and he left.
Yeah.
He sucked.
He's better as a swing tackle, and ideally you get somebody who's the starting right tackle. But guys like that make sense. Or it'll be, I covered the Giants one year. The first one they signed right out of the gate was they came out and they overpaid Devontae Booker out of nowhere.
Oh yeah.
Gave him like he was a minimum contract player previously, and the Giants, Dave Gettleman decided they needed him, so they paid him like $5 million for 1 year. So you never know. Like there's probably somebody out there that are like dying to sign. But that's why Monday's always both fun and stressful because within 5 minutes of noon or whatever, the contracts are going to start leaking, even though they technically, they only been talking for 5 minutes according to the rules. So
Yeah, they certainly did not crush drinks at Coaches or Prime or Tin Roof or Burn or any of the fine establishments in Indianapolis. Zach, appreciate you taking some time. We obviously went 15 minutes over as always. Appreciate it. Make sure you guys check out Flight Plan. Zach has really grown the pod, and he's gotten a bunch of good stuff on there. And free agency, no better place, obviously, athletic
and live show next month.
live
Hope to see you
show.
all there.
We are 5 weeks out.
It's gonna
We're
be
gonna
great.
be like 250 people in there. It's gonna be nuts. So I think there's like 15 tickets left. If you have not gotten one, we're not selling anymore after 15, and so we're not recording it. So if you don't want to be there, I would advise highly buying a ticket. I think they're like $30, dude. In New York City on Friday night, $30 is nothing. Appreciate it for listening. I'll be back in the feed Saturday. Me and Trevor Sickman will be talking lots of draft. Episode out with Mike Giardi from yesterday. Make sure you guys check that out, and we'll talk to you guys soon.